Much Ado About Mousing is not a bad Tom and Jerry cartoon. There were certainly bits in it that I thought were pretty okay. This was a 1964 Tom and Jerry cartoon directed by Chuck Jones, written by Michael Maltese, and we have Mel Blanc voicing Tom and also the bulldog at one point, and I think Jerry might have spoken as well. I'm not the biggest fan of when the characters speak. They don't necessarily speak, they kind of hushed whisper, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it doesn't bother me too much. It's irrelevant to my enjoyment of this cartoon. This is set primarily by a dock, and it starts off with Tom fishing for Jerry, and there's this wonderful little bit where Sleepy Jerry is kind of like a fish with his arms by his side and he's flapping about, and I think it's pretty well animated. And then what happens after that, of course, is Jerry pulls his first trick out, making Tom hit himself with the hammer, and what follows is the usual mix of Tom trying to hurt Jerry, Jerry always, seemingly always, getting one better over Tom. And I think it's pretty good fun. The dog definitely added something to it. It is just a kind of generic bulldog. I don't think it's got a name in this particular cartoon, but if I'm wrong about that, please feel free to let me know. But I think it worked quite well. There were a few things in it that stood out to me as being interesting, but generally it flowed well. It wasn't the most amazing. I think they utilised the space and the environment quite well. Certainly the backgrounds were well animated. I got the kind of sense that we were on this dock or by the water. I think that worked quite clearly. Two bits that I did love, without spoiling too much. The first is when Tom was flying through the air after a running Jerry and he splattered into the wall, and it was just so sudden, and the sound effect that went with it was just glorious. I absolutely loved it. Another bit is when Jerry, or Tom rather, was running, and he kind of ran on the spot to backtrack, and his fur all ruffled up, and he actually looked kind of fluffy and furry, and not as much as, kind of more recent animation would make it look, but it actually looked really furry, and I was kind of impressed with that. I could kind of imagine grabbing onto his little roll of fluff, and it was rather sweet. So there were several things throughout it that I thought worked quite well. As a whole, it's definitely not my favourite, absolutely not, but there's nothing about it that I think didn't work. There's nothing about it specifically that I would have changed either. I think Much Ado About Mousing, although not the best, is still a pretty decent Tom and Jerry cartoon.